The desert stretched endlessly in every direction. Waves of golden sand rolled like a quiet ocean, whispering softly with the wind. The sun blazed overhead, a silent guardian watching from the sky. Elara walked alone, her feet bare, her clothes wrapped tight to shield her skin. She had walked for days, maybe weeks. Time melted beneath the heat. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The birds always showed her the way. A group of white desert doves flew above her, circling as they coasted toward the west. She followed them like she always did. Where birds go, there is water, she had learned. Her shadow stretched long behind her. Though alone, Elara didn't feel lonely. In every grain of sand, in every desert breeze, she felt a strange comfort. Like the desert was speaking to her. By sunset, her lips were dry, and her legs tired. The sky turned shades of deep orange and purple, and the air began to cool. A soft noise stirred behind a dune. Elara crouched low. From behind the ridge, a pair of glowing amber eyes peeked out. It was Nabu, the desert fox. His white coat shimmered in the twilight. "You again," Elara smiled gently. The fox trotted forward, circling her before settling at her feet. Nabu never made a sound, but his presence always made her feel safe. She reached out and scratched behind his ears. "I saw doves going west," she whispered. "Maybe there's a spring." Nabu tilted his head, then darted forward. Elara followed. After about half an hour, they reached a cluster of rocks. Hidden between them, a shallow pool shimmered in the moonlight. Elara dropped to her knees, cupped the water in her hands, and drank. Birds fluttered above, nesting in the small crevices. She smiled. "Thank you," she whispered, unsure if she was thanking the fox, the birds, or the desert itself. Suddenly, the wind shifted. It carried something strange, something old. Elara stood, squinting into the distance. There, carved into the side of a far dune, she saw it, a broken stone wall, half buried in sand. At first she thought it was just rocks. But as she walked closer, she saw arches. Towers. Doors. It was a fortress. The fort was ancient, crumbling with time. Vines of desert ivy clung to the cracked sandstone. Birds fluttered through empty windows. The entrance gates stood wide open, as if waiting. Elara stepped inside. The wind stopped. A silence filled the air, not empty, but full. Full of stories. Of whispers. Inside, shadows danced across the faded murals on the walls, images of women with birds on their shoulders, men walking beside lions, children swimming with dolphins under the desert moon. "This place," she whispered. It was alive. Nabu padded beside her. The fox paused, then barked softly. From the corner of the room, a bright flash of red shot up. A parrot. "What's this? What's this?" "A dusty girl in a dusty fort," the bird cackled. Elara gasped. You can talk?" "Of course I can." "You just never listened before," the parrot said with a wink. "Name's Covey." And from the shadows came more animals. A slow-moving owl blinked at her. A hare hopped out, sniffing curiously. A young falcon landed above the door. And Tala, the camel Elara had met weeks ago, walked in through the gate, kneeling beside her. "Did you all follow me?" Covey fluttered down to her shoulder. "No, Elara. We were already here. We've been waiting." Elara's heart ached. Not with sadness. But with something deep. Something she didn't have a name for. She sat down on the cool stone floor, animals gathering around her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a wanderer. She felt like she was home. The desert wind had changed. It wasn't just the chill that blew through the crumbled towers that night. It was something deeper, an ancient breath, weaving between shadows and memory. Elara lay curled in a corner of the fort's grand hall, her head resting gently against Tala's soft side. The camel snored quietly, her breath warm and comforting. Above her, the ceiling was open to the stars. The sky sparkled like spilled silver dust. Covey the parrot perched nearby, murmuring in his sleep. Nabu the fox sat upright, still and silent, like a stone guardian watching the night. And Rico the falcon preened his feathers, occasionally glancing toward Elara with those sharp, intelligent eyes. Elara couldn't sleep. It wasn't just excitement, or the unfamiliar warmth of being surrounded by friends. It was that whisper again. That strange pull in her chest, like something calling her name, but not in words. Just feeling. She rose quietly and stepped outside into the cool desert night. The sand stretched out endlessly, glowing silver beneath the moon. A warm breeze touched her face. Then it came again, the call. She turned instinctively toward the back of the fort, where the moonlight revealed something she hadn't seen before, a narrow passageway between the stones, partly buried under sand and vines. The entrance was small, hidden, but not to her. As if it had been waiting just for her. Curiosity bloomed inside her like a rising tide. She stepped closer, brushing aside the hanging ivy. Covey stirred behind her. Going somewhere, desert girl? Elara smiled. I think so. Something's calling me. Not ominous at all, he muttered, flying to her shoulder. Together, they ducked into the narrow passage. It twisted downward, growing darker and cooler with each step, until finally it opened into a round chamber deep beneath the fort. The walls were covered in carvings. Dozens of birds, animals, suns, moons, and symbols, faded with time but still alive with meaning. In the center of the room sat a broken pedestal. At its base, a pile of sand. Elara approached. The carvings felt strangely familiar. Her fingers brushed the stone, and a sudden rush of wind whooshed through the chamber, though there were no windows. She gasped. The sand at the base of the pedestal shimmered and began to rise, swirling in a tiny whirlwind. Slowly, a shape formed, a glowing orb, faint and pulsing. What is that? Elara whispered. Covey's eyes widened. I've heard legends, but I never thought. Elara stepped closer. The orb pulsed brighter. Then her mind flooded. Images flashed behind her eyes, memories that weren't hers. Children speaking to birds, running with wolves. Ancient cities in the sand. Towers with feathers fluttering from the top. Songs sung in languages long forgotten. And then, her own face. Standing at the center of it all. The whirlwind ended. The orb dimmed and fell back into the sand. Elara collapsed to her knees, trembling. What was that? Covey was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Elara. I think you're one of them. One of who? The last listeners. She looked at him. He explained slowly, voice lower than she'd ever heard. Long ago, before the desert dried and swallowed everything, there were humans who could speak with us, not just understand, but feel us. They protected this land. They listened to it. They healed it when it hurt. But they vanished. All of them. Elara swallowed hard. But I'm not. You are, Covey said gently. You just needed the desert to remember you. She stared down at the pedestal. Her hands trembled, but something inside her had shifted. Not broken. Unlocked. Back in the hall. By morning, word had spread among the animals. The foxes whispered to the mice, the birds told the owls, the insects hummed excitedly. They all came to see her, Elara, the girl of wind and light, the one the desert had remembered. But with hope also came fear. Because the desert, too, was changing. That afternoon, Suri the owl arrived breathless, her wings dusty. Water pools are vanishing, she said. The oases are shrinking. Elara frowned. But it's the middle of the water cycle. There should be plenty. Suri shook her head. The rivers aren't flowing. The frogs are gone. Even the jackals are leaving. Something deeper than drought was at work. That night, Elara sat alone on the high wall of the fort, looking out into the dark. She felt the weight of the desert on her shoulders, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. The wind called again. But this time, it wasn't leading her to safety. It was asking for help. Elara whispered to the night sky, "I don't know what I'm meant to do, but I promise I'll try." From above, Rico the falcon cried out, circling her 3 times, before flying off into the darkness, like a messenger delivering her vow to the stars. Morning broke softly over the desert. A warm golden light spilled across the stone walls of the fort, brushing everything it touched with life. The broken tiles gleamed. The ivy shimmered. And birds, hundreds of them, had gathered. They perched on broken beams, window ledges, and hanging ropes. Falcons, sparrows, doves, and parrots, more than Elara had ever seen. Their wings glowed in the morning sun. She stood in the middle of the old courtyard, surrounded by the fluttering of feathers and the songs of so many voices. It was a sight that made her chest ache with wonder. Covey circled her head once, then landed on a broken banner pole. "They've come to see you, you know," he said proudly. "Word travels fast on the wind." Elara looked around, overwhelmed. "Why me?" "Because you heard the call. Because the wind trusted you." Tala the camel approached, her large eyes calm and kind. "This place," Tala said in her slow, gentle voice, "was once alive. It was a sanctuary for all creatures, winged and walking. A place of harmony. Before it was forgotten." Elara turned, taking in the murals again, the women with birds in their palms, the men guiding lions gently with only a glance. It didn't feel like legend anymore. It felt like truth. Nabu the fox stepped forward and nudged a half-buried stone tile with his snout. Elara knelt and brushed away the sand. Beneath it was a carving of a hand, reaching up toward a bird mid-flight. Around the hand were symbols she couldn't understand, yet, strangely, she could feel them. "They built this place," Covey said, fluttering to her shoulder. "The listeners. Your ancestors. They weren't rulers. They were bridges. Between our world and yours." Elara's fingers traced the carving. "What happened to them?" Covey looked to the sky. "When the skies dried. When the water stopped singing. They faded. Some left. Some stayed. Some forgot who they were." She whispered, "Like me." Tala bowed her head. "But the desert remembers. And it never forgets those who love it." The animals began to move, each creature finding a place within the ruins. Rico flew to the highest tower. Lumi the hare burrowed near the old kitchens. The lizards basked on sun-warmed stones. Even the bees returned, buzzing softly near cracked urns of once-forgotten herbs. And Elara, she walked through the fortress with new eyes. Where once she saw ruins, she now saw shelter. History. Home. She worked alongside her friends, brushing away sand, uncovering tiles and corners lost to time. They rebuilt not with stone, but with love. Water troughs were restored from rain catchers. Nesting spots were cleaned for returning birds. Even a shallow pool near the northern wall began to fill again, clear and still. The fortress was no longer forgotten. It was waking up. That night, Elara sat beneath a restored stone archway, a small fire flickering before her. Around it, her friends rested. Lumi the hare lay curled beside Nabu. Covey pecked gently at a bowl of dried figs she'd found in the old storerooms. Suri blinked from her perch above. The stars shimmered as they always did, but tonight, they seemed closer. "I used to wonder," Elara said softly, "if there was a place in the world for me. A place where I didn't have to run. Didn't have to hide." She looked around. "I think I've found it." Covey said nothing. He simply leaned against her arm, warm and feathered and real. But not everything was at peace. The wind still carried warnings. The birds still flew farther each day, searching for food, water, answers. And every night, fewer returned. Days passed. Elara grew stronger. She learned to understand the smallest twitch of a hawk's wings, the flick of a fox's ear. She could speak, not with words, but with presence. The animals trusted her, fully. And the desert, once cold and uncaring, now felt alive around her. When she walked barefoot across the sand, she felt it breathing beneath her toes. But with the rising warmth came concern. The small pool dried again. The doves stopped singing. The cactus flowers refused to bloom. And one morning, Rico returned alone, his feathers dusty, his eyes tired. He had flown far, searching for water. He found only bones. Elara gathered everyone that evening. They sat in the main courtyard as the sun dipped behind the dunes. "The drought is spreading," she said quietly. "The land is crying." A hush fell. "Can we save it?" Lumi asked, her tiny paws twitching. "I don't know," Elara said. "But I have to try. We have to try." Nabu stepped forward. "There's one place," he said. "Old as the stars. Older than the fortress. The moon well." Elara frowned. "What's that?" "It's a sacred spring," Tala added. "Hidden deep in the canyons. Only the desert knows the path." Suri fluttered her wings. "No one has seen it in generations. Some say it's gone." Covey tilted his head. "Or some say, it waits." Elara stood. "Then that's where I'll go." Silence followed. Then Covey nodded. "Not alone." "No," Tala added. "We will go together." The animals gathered close. Their eyes burned not with fear, but with something fierce and ancient. Hope. That night, Elara stood once more atop the highest wall. She looked out into the desert, heart pounding. She remembered the first time she'd arrived here, dusty, tired, alone. Now, she had a family. Now, she had purpose. As the stars blinked above and the birds circled the fortress one last time, Elara whispered into the wind. "Tomorrow, we go to the moon well." The next morning began not with sunlight, but with stillness. A deep silence settled over the fortress's calm, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that came before something important. Something sacred. Elara stood in the central courtyard with her companions around her, Tala the camel, Nabu the fox, Covey the parrot, Suri the owl, Lumi the hare, and Rico the falcon. The birds of the desert, those that still remained, fluttered in the towers, watching from the shadows. In her hands, Elara held a leather pouch filled with dried berries, water in a carved gourd, and a small strip of faded cloth, part of a banner she'd found in the fortress with the symbol of a bird and a crescent moon. She tied it around her wrist. Tala lowered her great head. "Climb on, Elara. The desert road is long." Elara nodded, lifting herself onto Tala's back. "Which direction is the moon well?" she asked. "We do not know the way," Nabu said, his golden eyes serious. "But the wind remembers. And it will show us, if we listen." The journey begins. They left the safety of the fortress just as the sun crested the dunes. The wind stirred behind them, brushing their backs like a farewell from an old friend. Covey flew above, scouting from the sky. Suri took the lead, guiding them with soft hoots. Rico flew point, scanning the horizon. Nabu padded silently at Tala's side. And Lumi, never far, bounced from rock to rock, sniffing the air, ears alert. Hours passed in golden silence. The desert shimmered with heat. Mirage pools appeared and disappeared. The sand hummed under their feet. But Elara felt no fear. The animals were her compass. The desert no longer seemed empty, it was alive with whispers. At midday, they reached a cliff's edge. Beyond it lay a canyon, a deep, twisting path of rust-colored stone and forgotten shadows. Tala knelt, and Elara slid off. Suri spoke first. The wind trail. That's what the old owls called it. Few have gone down. Fewer returned. Then we'll be among the few, Elara said, brushing her hair back. Let's go. Into the canyon. The air cooled instantly as they descended. The canyon walls towered above them, painted with the memories of 1,000 years. Strange markings dotted the stone, symbols Elara felt drawn to. At one bend, they found a smooth wall covered in carvings. Elara stepped close. The images showed a young woman with birds in her hair, speaking to animals. She stood before a great circle of water beneath a full moon. Around her were lions, serpents, hawks, and deer. Elara reached out. Her fingers tingled. Suddenly, a soft wind blew through the canyon, though the walls were too high for any natural breeze. A whisper. Remember us. Covey gasped. Did you hear that? Elara nodded slowly. Yes. And I think these aren't just carvings. They're memories. Left behind. They speak only to those who belong, Suri said softly. Elara stared at the woman in the mural. Her face wasn't identical, but the eyes, the hair, the presence. It could have been her. They were real, she said. The listeners. They lived. They loved. They protected this place. And maybe, Nabu said gently, you are one of them reborn. Elara's throat tightened. Not with fear, but with something deeper. Responsibility. That night, they made camp at the base of the canyon. The stars were far away, hidden behind the narrow slit of sky above. A fire crackled quietly as the animals curled around Elara, forming a ring of warmth. I used to dream, she whispered, about being part of something. Not just surviving, but belonging. And now that I'm here, I don't want to let this world fade. I won't. Tala made a soft humming sound in her throat. Even the smallest spring can feed the roots of a dying tree. And the smallest voice can echo across the desert, Covey added, his feathers fluffed against the cold. Suri blinked slowly. Tell us a story, Elara. Elara smiled faintly. I don't know any. You do, said Nabu. You carry them in your heart. Speak. And we will listen. Elara closed her eyes. She let the desert speak through her. A story of the first listener. There once was a girl named Maelra, born under the twin moons. She was alone, like I was. But the animals took her in. They taught her how to speak with her heart, not her mouth. She healed the wing of a hawk, fed a wolf pup from her hand, and sang to the sand when it cried. The desert grew green around her. But one day, a drought came, a great silence. The stars hid. The birds left. The water vanished. And Maelra, broken-hearted, climbed the tallest dune and whispered into the wind, if I must give myself for the desert to live, I will. The wind heard her. And the next morning, the clouds returned. The rain fell. Life was restored. Maelra was never seen again. But the animals say, sometimes, when the desert blooms after a long silence, it is Maelra's spirit walking through the flowers. Silence followed. Even the fire seemed to bow in reverence. That, said Covey finally, was not a story. That was truth. Elara looked into the flames. Maybe it's always been inside me. Then let it guide us tomorrow, Suri said. To the moon well. If it still lives. Elara nodded. I'll follow the story. Wherever it takes me. The canyon narrowed as they walked deeper into its throat. Elara and her companions moved slowly, each step deliberate. The red stone walls began to glow faintly, though no sun reached them. A strange warmth pulsed beneath their feet, and the air tasted like metal and memory. Even the birds were quiet now. They reached a bend where the canyon opened into a circular basin. Above them, the sky was visible again, though the sun had disappeared even though it was mid-afternoon. And there, directly above, hung the moon. Huge. Red. Burning. Elara stared in silence. "The fire moon," whispered Covey. "It's real." Tala trembled. "This moon comes once in 100 years. The last time." The great silence fell. Elara's pulse quickened. "What does it mean?" "It means," said Nabu gravely, "that the desert is remembering something painful." The red moon watched them silently, bleeding light across the canyon walls. The wind swirled suddenly, tugging at Elara's dress, her hair, her very breath. Then she heard it again. A voice, not words, but a sound older than speech. "You are the last." Elara stumbled. "What was that?" she gasped. The others looked around, alert, but they hadn't heard it. I think the moon just spoke to me." Covey's feathers bristled. "The fire moon doesn't speak in kindness. Only in truth." Elara walked slowly into the basin's center. Beneath the strange red light, the sand had formed a spiral, naturally yet impossibly perfect. She stepped into it. Suddenly. A vision. The canyon disappeared. The sand dissolved. And she stood alone in a vast, golden plain beneath a stormy sky. A woman in a flowing robe stood before her, face half covered, eyes glowing like the desert sun. "You walk the path of the last listener," the woman said. Elara could not speak. "The balance is broken. The rivers are vanishing. The sky forgets to cry. You must awaken the moon well, or everything will perish." Elara swallowed hard. "How?" "With memory. With sacrifice. With love." Then the wind howled, and the image shattered. Elara dropped to her knees, panting. Her friends rushed to her side. "What happened?" asked Tala, panic in her voice. "I saw her," Elara whispered. "One of the first listeners," she said. "I have to awaken the moon well." Covey nodded solemnly. Then the fire moon was a sign. A warning. And a door. Rico let out a piercing cry from above, circling. The wind shifted again, curling toward a narrow tunnel at the far edge of the basin. Sand scattered, revealing the top of a stone stair. Elara rose to her feet. She turned to her companions. "Let's finish this." The staircase felt like a secret buried by time. Carved into the canyon's stone, the steps wound downward, their edges worn smooth by wind and centuries. Elara held her hand to the wall as she descended, each footstep echoing softly behind her. Covey clung to her shoulder, unusually quiet. Tala waited at the entrance with the others, too large to follow through the narrow stone throat. Nabu stayed close at her heels, and Suri fluttered ahead, her wings brushing against ancient cobwebs. Only Rico could fly easily here, gliding silently in the dimness above. They descended into stillness. Then the staircase opened into a great chamber. Elara stepped inside and froze. The walls were covered in ancient paintings and carvings, hundreds, maybe thousands of them. The style was delicate, intricate, and familiar. Scenes danced across the stone, women singing beside rivers, children riding on leopards' backs, wolves bowing their heads in reverence to human figures. Entire families of animals and humans, side by side. And always, birds. Birds soaring in spirals above everything, wings wide, eyes wise. In the center of the chamber was a massive stone bowl, cracked and dry. Elara stepped toward it. "This is it," she whispered. "The moon well." But it was empty. Dust filled its center, cracked earth where once there must have been life. Suri landed silently beside her. "They say the moon well is not just a spring," she said. "It is a mirror." Elara looked at her. "A mirror?" Suri nodded. It reflects the heart of the listener. If the heart is true, the well awakens. Covey hopped from Elara's shoulder to the rim of the dry basin. So, no pressure, then. Elara smiled faintly, then stepped into the circle. She knelt, resting her hands on the dry stone. Nothing happened. She closed her eyes. And let go. Elara's vision. She stood once again on the desert plain, but this time, it was not dry. It was bursting with color. Fields of golden grasses waved in the wind, and in the distance, flocks of birds spun like silver thread across the sky. She turned. A group of people stood before her. All wore robes the color of sand and sun. And with each person stood an animal, an eagle, a leopard, a jackal, a horse, a crow. They were the listeners. The first. They spoke in unison, not aloud, but in her heart. You carry our voice. You carry our hope. You carry our sorrow. A woman stepped forward. The same woman from the fire moon. We gave everything to protect this place. But memory fades. Language is lost. Now, you must remember for us. Elara opened her mouth. But I'm just me. The woman smiled gently. And that is all you need to be. Then she held out her hand and placed something glowing into Elara's chest. A warmth surged through her. And she awoke. The awakening. Elara gasped. Her palms burned against the stone. The dust began to stir, then swirl, then rise like a breath. Water. It burst from the cracks, clear and cold, gushing up from nowhere, glowing faintly in the dark. It filled the moon well, brimming over its sides. The entire room lit up with a silver light. The carvings glowed. Above her, the ceiling split open slightly, revealing a sliver of night sky, and the fire moon shone down, casting its light into the water. The chamber hummed with life. Nabu bowed his head. You've done it. Suri blinked slowly. You remembered. Covey let out a wild, joyful cry, flapping his wings. She did it. I knew she would. Elara stood slowly, her skin tingling with the energy of the chamber. The moon well pulsed, like a heartbeat. The desert was listening. Outside the canyon, Tala and Lumi watched the sky. Dark clouds gathered, slowly at first, then thick and full. And then rain. Real rain. The first drops in years fell softly across the desert, hissing into the sand, waking the seeds that had slept for so long. Birds began to call. Distant animals lifted their heads. And at the heart of it all, Elara stepped out of the canyon, glowing in the moonlight, her eyes full of tears. But not of sorrow. Of love. It fell in gentle threads over the dunes, soaking into the parched earth like a whispered apology. Elara stood beneath the clouds with her arms open wide, her face lifted toward the sky. Each drop touched her like a memory, cool, soft, alive. Around her, the animals emerged from shelter, blinking in disbelief. Tala lifted her massive head, nostrils flaring. It's true rain, she said with awe. Not illusion. Not mirage. Lumi hopped joyfully in circles, splashing in the shallow puddles. I forgot what this felt like. The birds began to sing. Rico soared high above them, slicing through the falling water with strong wings, his sharp cry echoing across the canyon. But Elara stood still. Because even in the joy, she felt the weight of what had begun. Return to the fortress. They traveled back through the canyons, retracing their steps through land already beginning to bloom. Tiny sprouts of green broke through the sand. The riverbed they'd passed, once dry and cracked, now glistened with a gentle stream. As they reached the fortress gates, the sky had cleared, but the world felt different. Alive. The animals left behind, sheltering within the fortress, rushed out to greet them. It rained, cried a young desert hawk. We felt it even here. You did it, said a squirrel with wide, sparkling eyes. Elara didn't speak right away. She looked at the sky. It wasn't just me, she said at last. It was the desert. It remembered and forgave. A new role. In the days that followed, the fortress transformed. The old rain catchers began to fill. Flowers bloomed in the cracks between stones. Birds nested high in the broken towers again. Bees buzzed in small swarms, drawn by the scent of rebirth. And travelers came. Humans. Not many, just a few. Desert wanderers, tired and lost. But the animals, who once feared people, now welcomed them, because Elara welcomed them. They gathered in the courtyard, listening as she spoke by the fire, telling them about the moon well, about the listeners, about the whispers on the wind. Many stayed. Some helped repair the stone walls, plant food, dig new wells. They worked side by side with the animals, slowly building a new home, one of balance. Elara became a quiet leader. Not commanding. Guiding. She taught them not to take from the desert, but to walk with it. She showed children how to talk with birds, how to listen to the wind. She didn't wear a crown. She wore sand and smiles. But not all was healed. One evening, Elara stood alone on the wall, watching the horizon. Covey landed beside her. You're thinking again, he said gently. She nodded. It rained. But only here. The rest of the desert, it's still hurting. Covey sighed. Healing takes time. I know. But I felt how broken it is. The silence is still out there. Rico flew in from the east, feathers ruffled. He landed hard, breathing fast. There's a dust storm coming. A bad one. Elara frowned. How bad? Rico looked at her, his eyes dark. The kind that eats everything. She turned to Covey. Then we need to send out word. Get the wanderers. The animals. Bring them here. To the fortress? To shelter. To safety. If we can't save the whole desert yet, we'll save what we can. The storm approaches. By the next morning, the sky had turned bronze. A wall of wind and dust rolled across the dunes, fast and loud like thunder. Elara stood atop the gate with Rico and Covey, watching as herds of animals began to appear on the horizon, foxes, snakes, deer, even jackals and vultures. And behind them, people. Families. Old men, children. All weary. All following the whisper of the wind. All drawn to Elara. Inside the fortress, the humans and animals worked together to prepare. Food was gathered. Blankets were sewn. Water was poured into clay jars and carried to each corner. Tala stood at the gate, her massive form calm and ready. Nabu took his place beside her. The fortress, once forgotten, was now a beacon. Elara's choice. That night, before the storm struck, Elara lit a single fire in the courtyard. The entire fortress's creatures and people alike gathered around her. She stood in silence, looking at each of them. You came here, she said softly, not because I called you, but because the desert did. Because something inside you still believes in balance. In listening. A hush. The storm will pass. And when it does, we will rebuild not just this place, but the world, one where birds don't fly in fear, where foxes can sleep without hunters, where children know how to speak with the wind. She reached into her satchel and removed a smooth white stone, something she'd found at the base of the moon well. She placed it in the center of the fire. The flame turned silver. And the wind paused. Just for a moment. As if listening. The dust storm came like a beast from the deep. It roared across the desert, swallowing dunes, snapping trees, choking the air. But inside the fortress, behind strong stone and stronger hearts, they waited. Together. The birds huddled in the tower cracks. Children wrapped their arms around foxes. Falcons stood beside old men. The fire burned silver, steady at the center. And Elara stood at the gate. Watching. Listening. A flicker of darkness. The storm raged for hours, then days. On the third day, a new sound rose through the wind, voices. Not cries for help, but shouting. Metal clanked. Elara narrowed her eyes. A group of armed men emerged through the dust, faces covered, weapons in hand, eyes sharp with greed. At their front rode a man in a black cloak, on a tall desert horse. He dismounted slowly, his boots sinking into the sand. So, it's true, he said, voice rough. The girl with the desert in her hands. Covey landed on Elara's shoulder, tense. They came for water, he whispered. The man stepped closer. We saw the rain. Followed the birds. And here we find a miracle. Water. Food. Shelter. All under your rule? I don't rule anything, Elara said calmly. I protect it. He laughed. Then protect it from us. The soldiers behind him raised their weapons. Nabu bared his teeth. Tala stepped forward, growling softly. But Elara raised a hand. No, she said. There's been enough fear in this desert. She stepped toward the man. He looked at her strangely, like he expected defiance. Not gentleness. You don't have to take anything, Elara said. You're welcome here. We all are. The man scoffed. You'd share this with everyone? Elara nodded. Yes. Because the desert doesn't belong to one. It belongs to all. Those who walk, those who fly, those who crawl. And those who remember how to listen. The wind swirled again, not angry this time, but warm. Carrying her voice across the fortress. Behind her, people stood with animals by their side. They had no weapons. Only truth. Only unity. The man stared at them. And slowly lowered his weapon. He looked away, ashamed. Then turned and walked back into the dust. His men followed. Not a word more was spoken. After the storm. When the winds died, the world was different. The fortress still stood, stronger than ever. The desert was scarred, but alive. And Elara? She stood taller. The legacy. In the months that followed, green returned to the edges of the dunes. The moon well fed not just the fortress, but the lands beyond. Animals spread the seeds of wildflowers across the sand. The birds taught their young to sing again. More people came, but not as conquerors. As caretakers. Elara remained at the heart of it all, not as a queen, but as a guardian. She wrote down the stories of the desert in a leather-bound book. Each page carried a memory, a rabbit's laughter, an eagle's sorrow, a child's first whisper to a lizard. She called the book Whispers of the Desert Wind. And when the time came, she placed it in a stone box beside the moon well, so the desert would never forget again. One last evening. Many years later, Elara sat on the fortress wall. Her hair had silver in it now. But her eyes still burned like the sun. She looked over the sand, where antelope ran beside boys and girls with bare feet and gentle hearts. Covey perched beside her, older too, but proud. So, he said, you kept your promise. Elara smiled. I did. She looked up at the moon, now soft and white again. But the real promise, she whispered, was to love without fear. And to listen. The wind passed over her cheeks like a kiss. And somewhere far off, the desert whispered back.